So welcome to our second discussion of Macbeth, and we don't have the preliminaries, so we can go straight to the text. As I suggested in the email, I wanted to go back to a couple of the scenes in Act 1 briefly, because there are many things that we're not going to be able to read, but there are some important things that we want to touch on. And I tried to suggest very early in Act 1 that there's an essential ambiguity about the excellence, human excellence of courage, and the image for that is the cannon that's doubly charged. The cannon that's doubly charged is an image of a weapon possessed by King Duncan, right? But if you double charge a cannon, it'll blow up in your own face, right? And I think that's the danger that any leader of military rulers face. If the leaders get too cocky, then they might think they can take you. If they get too ambitious and courageous, this is an ancient problem. But I think that image is meant to capture that. And I just want to go back to that passage. I'm going to try and introduce lines that we haven't read last time, just to try and develop things. This is Act 1, Scene 3, line 59. And I'm just going to quickly get the text online open. So this is the Folger text. Which is... not there. No, sorry, Act 1, Scene 3, and it's not that line number. Where does he come point against point with the Thane of Cawdor?
Who?
Macbeth.
I think you what you're saying, you don't know.
What is it? What do you do?
He comes point against point with the Thane of Cawdor. Yeah, this is the problem of reading.
Act 1, Scene 3, 64.
That's exactly right. Act 1, Scene 3, line 64, which in the Folger text is, page 13?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if we start at line 60, line 59, Norway himself with terrible numbers, assisted by that most disloyal traitor, the Thane of Cawdor. So we don't get a name, we get the position, and Macbeth is often called Glamis, because he's Thane of Glamis, and he's going to be called Thane of Cawdor shortly. Ross and Lennox come and say, we were sent to address you as Thane of Cawdor. So one person called Thane of Cawdor is going to be replaced by another, and they're not going to be very different. Right? They're double of the same. They're both going to be usurpers who attack the king. One replaces the other. And that's why this description here is of interest. So, assisted by that most disloyal traitor, Thane of Cawdor, began a dismal conflict till that Bellona's bridegroom. Now, Bellona is apparently another word for the god of war. The god of war's wife. So he's the god of war's wife's bridegroom, so the god of war. Right? Lapped in proof, confronted him with self-comparisons. Now, on the surface, that means he confronts him with a comparable self who can fight him. But the obvious irony is immediately that he confronts him with someone who's very like himself, who will immediately become a traitor and, in this case, successfully kill the king. Otherwise, they're the same. Now, in the next line, it says, point against point. Rebellious arm against arm. Now, point against point means initially sword against sword, because swords are pointed. But if you look up the Folger text, and now what 19th century scholars took them 3 weeks to do, we can do in 2 minutes on a search function on a PDF, right? You can just look up point, you don't have to reread the whole play, make every list for the word heir, and so on. But people have done that in the 19th century. Now, having looked this up, I just want to jump ahead to. So there are two main uses the word point has. It means an aspect of something, an element of, or it means the sword. And if we look ahead to Act 1, Scene 6, line 18. Line 18 to 24, we have Lady Macbeth. Sorry, what did I say? Act 1, Scene 6?
Yeah, page 37, yeah.
Page 37?
Seven.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Great. And if we look at line 18, this is Lady Macbeth welcoming Duncan. All our service, in every point, in every element, twice done and then done double, were poor and single business to contend against those honours, deep and broad, wherewith your majesty loads our house. Okay, now, what's a service done double? It could just be, a redoubled effort, but clearly in this play, it means some kind of duplicity, which we immediately get, because the service is to be hospitable and to murder him. Right, so so double has this sense in this play of duplicitous. Now, in every point, and she's referring to the fact in every element of our hospitality, but you want to grab? You don't need that if the door's open. Yeah, okay.
I just tap that at the front.
Yeah, you probably won't need it, but if you need it, yeah. Okay, so in every point, and point is also used in other places in the play as, we've just seen it used as sword, right? And they are going to they're going to stab him to death with a sword. So I think I hope that I'm justified in taking the word point as being ambiguous here. If we can take the service being done double as duplicitous, then the word point has this double meaning. And then I think that goes back to the meaning of the line where Macbeth is compared to the current Thane of Cawdor, point against point, element against element, sword against sword. And this is, when he says he's confronted with self-comparison, that's like being seen in the mirror image, a comparison to yourself. So the new Thane of Cawdor meet the old Thane of Cawdor, essentially. Now, okay, a couple more things from Act 1. So, Malcolm's judgment, the king's judgment, in Act 1, Scene 3, line 74. Sorry, just jumping around. We'll soon be moving steadily through Act 2. Act 1, Scene 3, 74. I think. No, not there. Yeah, I think I must have been, I don't know what I was doing, but I think I was looking at, Act 1, Scene 3, line 74. Do you have at line 73, no more that Thane of Cawdor shall deceive our bosom interest? So that's the king's capacity to understand what's going on with the current Thane of Cawdor is about equal to his capacity to understand the thoughts of the future Thane of Cawdor. He's a poor judge of character. I'll just...
I think you meant Act 2.
Yeah,
Act
you're right, because
274.
I took that from the top of the page,
Yes.
I think, and that's...
There's a
yeah.
search function on my tablet that was handy.
Thank you. I'm going to rely on your annotations. So yeah, I was just looking at I just grabbed it from the top of the page. So that's Act 1, Scene 2, line 74. Now, if we jump ahead to Act 1, Scene 4, line 12, I hope. Act 1, Scene 4, line 12. Duncan is saying there's no art, skill. Art doesn't mean a fine, nuanced capacity or creative skill. It means a practical skill. There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust, which means he was absolutely wrong. Right? That's his capacity to judge human beings.
But it also goes back to the initial fair is foul. Things are not what they seem.
Right, but does that make foul fair and fair foul?
Not fair in the just sense. It's things are not the way they seem. I mean,
Yes,
he
yes, that's
thought
absolutely correct.
these
Absolutely,
men were loyal and wonderful, and he keeps praising Macbeth as well, and
yeah.
deep down there's something else.
Yeah, no, that's very true, and that touches on a continuous theme in this play. That's very true. There's no art to find the man's construction in the face, and then his third act in this same scene is to say that his son is going to inherit, which is, I don't know if that's legitimate because apparently there's been an election system running. I don't know, and maybe they always elect the son because his grandfather was king, another King Malcolm. I don't know. But the fact is that it seems to be a bit like Denmark. There's some kind of an election system for princes. Anyway, that could also be his A, simplicity, and B, misjudgment, leading to his own contributing, not leading to his own murder because that would be ridiculous, and unjust. It would be unjust to say that he's responsible for his death. But it could contribute with the connivance of someone who has no scruples. Yeah.
Just on this question of courage, so there is this doubling element. We need a new chair.
Maybe grab one of those squares. Oh, it's not a square. Yeah, sorry.
But I'm just trying to sort of understand the comparison of Macbeth's courage and Lady Macbeth's courage. And I can't get my head around, that line which you spoke about last week with Macbeth, the difference between the hand and the eye, that he has courage if there's a separation of his hand and eye, and
Yes.
only when he's sort of blind to what his hand is going to do.
Yes.
And then there's the same thing.
Can we go to that line that you're discussing?
Yeah, can someone find it? But she says...
Anson, I trust you.
Yeah. She says something very similar. I'm wondering how similar it is in when she says at, I think it's 57.
Of what act?
Act 5.
Scene 5?
Sorry, Act 1, Scene 5.
Yep.
Line 56 or 57. Come thick night.
Yeah. Now, can I want to just give tiny
Yeah.
bit of context when you say this.
Yeah.
Because this is part of what I wanted to discuss. So, where's she saying come thick night?
Page 33 of
Yep.
line 57 or...
Yep,
It's
okay.
halfway through
Yeah.
the sentence, the line, rather.
Okay, so I just want to go back to line 47, right?
Yeah.
She says, come you spirits. Now she says to him, she says by herself while she's reading the letter, come that I may pour my spirits into you. And so what are her spirits? Well, she invokes them here. Come you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here. Now, we're obviously, I want to discuss this, her understanding of masculinity and femininity shortly, but we'll get to this point first. But that's important because, yeah, she's saying, take out any gentleness in me and fill me from crown to the top full of direst cruelty. All right, so she's calling on these spirits, yes?
Yeah, and then she says, and then she's calling on them so that my keen knife see not the wound it makes.
Sorry,
So-
line number? 58, yeah.
Yeah, 58.
Yeah.
Like, and
Come thick night, pour thee, that is, make thee dark, right?
Yeah.
In the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes.
yeah,
Yes.
so what I can't understand is courage, being blind to what you're doing, like do you just need to be blind to what you're doing to have courage, or is it cowardice? Like is it that you don't?
Okay, so there's
Yeah.
two aspects. I mean, if you have some thoughts that you want to.
Oh, I have no idea. That's why I'm asking the question.
Okay, there's two aspects. To be courageous, I think, just relying partly on Aristotle, but partly experiences that we all have. When we do something that we think, I don't want to do this, but I have to do it, right? You have to blind yourself to whatever the risk, the element of chance, right? So Fortune in the first Act 1, Scene 1, Fortune favours the enemy, but he defies Fortune because he's courageous. That's why he's brave Macbeth, right?
But he's not blind to the risk. He's blind to the act. Like he doesn't want to see what he's doing.
Yes, I'm getting to that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one element of being courageous is to dim the risk. The other, though, is what you're aiming at, right? So he's aiming at to save the kingdom, right? Someone could be courageous because they're aiming to help someone, a friend or something, right? Or you could be murdering someone to take over the kingdom.
Is that courageous?
Well, this is the question. Yeah.
Wasn't it in the classical world, courage had to do with nobility?
Yes.
It had to be a noble purpose?
Yes. That's exactly right.
With
That's
courage, and if you're going to commit evil, well, that's not deemed courage. I don't know.
But this raises a very, very, very difficult question. You're right that the normal teaching, which had been propagated at this time, which was a version of Aristotle, right, was that ultimately what we call ethical or moral virtues had an end that transcended morals, right? But that's a very difficult thing. Because if you say, like Socrates in the Platonic dialogues, that the character of your act depends upon you knowing you're doing the right thing, and then the same Socrates says no one can know the full truth about the ends of human life, then you're saying no one can be virtuous. I'm just summarising a problem. I'm not saying that's the final, but that's exactly why Aristotle talks about the ethical virtues through books 2 to 5, and then 2 to 5 of the Ethics. And in book 6, he says, well, we've been saying this all depends upon right judgment. So, but what's judgment? And then he talks about thought all through book 6 and has to begin all over again. And the first place he begins with, well, Socrates has said you have to know what you're doing. And that raises this, and he writes a whole book about the problem of weakness of the will, which is knowing you should do one thing and do. And so, but that's the problem that the teaching, which is that, oh, you should do the right thing for the right cause, raises. Who knows what the right cause is? So it's a difficulty of interpretation, yeah.
And he knows it's the wrong cause. Yeah, so.
Now, I think us looking externally, we're not in any doubt that murdering the king while he sleeps might be bad. I think, right? But that's Shakespeare. Sorry?
He thinks so as well. He says to Lady
Yes.
Macbeth, I shall have no more in this business, Don't want to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Just if you can for the future, pick
Yeah.
that thing up. Yeah. Okay, so, but she is giving sensibility to the knife. Let the knife not see. And there's a lot of projection in this. And of course, your immediate question is, well, are the witches a projection? But then we have Banquo and so on. So the witches seem to be, we're asked to believe that they are in this world as much as the people are, right? In the way that the dagger, which we're about to read about in a minute, is not. there's lots of interest around this passage, which I want to read. Where are we? So we are at 1. Are we in Act 5 or 7? Because this is so blown up. Okay, thank you. Now, there's three uses of the word milk in this, right? And I repeated one last time, but I just want to repeat. This is the other two. So she says when he comes back, I'm afraid you were too full of the milk of human kindness. Again, I can't help thinking of Billy Bragg. Does no one know Billy Bragg? No one. Yes? Yeah. At last. Okay. She thinks he's too full of the milk of human kindness. And then we have her saying, where's this? At line 54, where we are now in Act 1, Scene 5, line 54. Come to my woman's breasts, these spirits, right, who were going to fill her full of cruelty and unsex her. Come to my woman's breast and take my milk for gore, you murdering ministers, wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. There's so much here of philosophical thought that it's very difficult to immediately know what he might mean. What's a sightless, an invisible substance? The first, that's a Platonic form, or an Aristotelian energeia, or in Aquinas. So because Aquinas reinterprets classical philosophy in a Christian mode, and there are levels of things that are invisible. There are forms and angels and God. And so, it's just, he uses phrases that imply lots of reading in lots of different areas. But in any case, this phrase, take my milk for gore. Now, I immediately think, because I don't know Renaissance English very well, that means take out my milk and replace it with gore, and that means the same thing as unsex me and fill me full of cruelty. Right? I have read in the Arden that some editors have suggested, because the word take can mean become infected with. Right? Take my milk for gore means, I don't know, infect my milk with gore or infect your gore with my milk. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has any other suggestions, because it's a difficult phrase, because the word take can just simply be exchange, but that's the third use of the word milk. And the second, where she says to Macbeth, who is now halting or pausing in his determination, if I had sworn to do so as you had sworn to kill Duncan, I would have taken the baby that was milking me, that was being fed by me, and throw its head against the wall. So I don't know how much help she needs being cruel. She's already pretty intense. That's one way.
I was just going to say, if I can, Martin, as well as take it, in the sense of take it from me.
Yep.
It could also mean, in addition or alternatively, understand it as not milk but gore.
Right. Third alternative. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's also makes good sense.
Yeah.
Would that connect to? Could that connect to the question of he's not without ambition but doesn't have the illness to attend it? That this thing about illness, something poisonous or unhealthy or unclean? Or...
Yes. Yeah, that would really help with, if we took take in that sense of become infected with, then yeah. Just a very minor note. In Act 4, Macduff says he has no child. She says, I know what it is to have suckled a child. So she's had a child. Now, many things could make this consistent. She may, in Holinshead, the historian, apparently Lady Macbeth, before she married Macbeth, had a child that died from another marriage. Like, he could just be replicating that. I don't see any great problem, but it's clearly a small tension in the text, unless you assume that something like this has happened. But I just raised that. But now I think we should.
How did you answer my question?
What was your question? So she says, so that my keen knife not see the wound it makes.
Yeah.
That's an image, yes? So you're saying clearly that that's an image of him saying, let my eye not see the deed until it's done.
Yeah, there's this constant battle, well, it's all about resolve, right? She's saying, have resolve, just stick to your guns, like this is what we've agreed on. So she wants him to remain blind, and she wants to also be sort of blind to what the deed is so that they can carry it through. So it's for the sake of resolve that they don't want to see the sin or the horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how is that courageous? That's my question. Like, why is it, just a denial of what they're doing? Is that, they're just being stubborn fools, I guess.
If we said that, I made this suggestion, courage has the two elements. You have to ignore danger, right? And you have to evaluate the end. And this is what Deborah was raising, that, classically the notion of courage is that it's a noble act, but that nobility implies the end is, decent, respectable, or something. Yeah. Now, it's very easy for the training of the character that allows someone to be courageous, which is to be contemptuous of certain kinds of weakness. It's very easy for that capacity to become dislocated from decent ends. And Macbeth and Lady Macbeth are sort of examples of the dislocation of the capacity to ignore the danger from the evaluation of the worth of the end that you ignore it for. So that means he himself says later on, let fate come into the lists. He's willing to take on the whole world, which is a kind of, exaggeration of an aspect of courage absent the evaluation of the end. Yeah. So, and this is why the way the word nature is used in this play is so interesting. I'm going to make a suggestion which might sound wildly ridiculous, but I think the word nature it's identified with life, but not with life that has ends. Right? And where does that come from? So there's obviously a conflict between pagan, Christian, and classical understandings sort of competing to describe the way things are in this play, as in others. And my thought is that Shakespeare is saying, if you accepted the Christian view of nature, then nature is low, right? Because heaven is high. And then if you got rid of any belief in heaven, then you would just have a low nature. And that's in some Christian thinkers. And the early moderns like Descartes were able to make use of that rhetorically and say, look, in this fallen world, there's nothing particularly fantastic. What we should do is conquer nature, which is merely, the vicissitudes of life that make things difficult. We should grow our economy. We should have universal healthcare. We should have medicine and engineering. This is just Descartes. Medicine and engineering to conquer nature for our benefit. And so I think he's obviously showing us a perverted version of courage, right? And I think that's the particular kind of perversion that he's talking about in a world that's disenchanted. Yeah. Okay. So, on manliness. Now, we are in Act 1, Scene 5. Let's go to Act 1, Scene 7. And if you go to line 34, it's page 41 of the folder, he says, we will proceed no further in this business. Why? He hath honoured me of late, and I have bought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which would be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. So there's a couple of things that have a long resonance in the play. One is you put on new clothes and you're not used to them. So he's already been described might be Scene 4, as just having put on the clothes of the Thane of Cawdor, not being used to them, and that's why he's sort of enraptured in this scene with the witches. Borrowed clothes, yeah. But there it said you can get used to them. And here he's saying, oh, I want to wear these golden opinions as clothes while they're new. Now here he has an ordinary respect for other people's respect, right? Other people have a good opinion of me, and I reciprocate that. Whereas what he and she are doing is they want to gain something that is universally admired to be king, but they want to gain it by means that would not be admired. So they're having to put aside that. It's an ordinary receptivity that human beings have to recognition and praise, which is why if you're trying to sell something to someone, you have to praise those people. You would make a very discerning choice, sir, in buying this Jaguar. That kind of thing. Okay.
The means must be secret and not seen, so not even the knife should see it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. The deed has to be invisible.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, her response is, was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? So instead of dressing yourself in opinions, you dressed yourself in a hope that you will become king. That it makes it look as if everything we do is just adopting one set of clothing over another, which would be the case if there was no natural principle by which this conduct is better than that conduct. It's just a choice. It's kind of, if nature is neutral to choices. Right? Now, was the hope drunk? That's going to come up in the scene that we read today where the porter talks about the equivocation of drunkenness, right? Which is being used as a metaphor throughout the play. Now, then she says, first of all, she says, from this time such I count thy love, at line 43 to 4. If your hope was so brave then and has since woken up, hungover, green and pale, then I account any protestation of your love to be of the same level. Of course, she herself is going to say we have to act one thing and do another. So what she is now using rhetorically against Macbeth, she implies against herself and him anyway. Now, read the next line. Art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valour as thou art in desire? And then what she says in the rest says, the will sets a goal, and a coward says, I dare not attain the goal, right, regardless of the means. Would that to be the same in thine own act and valour as you are in desire. Now that's one, you could say that's a mirror of courage. Right? The courageous person recognises something is difficult and does it anyway. Now, we were talking before about, well, that's because the end is noble as opposed to ignoble. But she's using that aspect of courage against him. She's always saying, when she wants to get him fired up, she says, art thou afeard? Afeard. Now sorry?
Oldest trick in the book.
Yes. Yeah, are you scared? Yeah, no, just get that rope and fly out over the river where the rocks are. Everyone else has done it, you coward. And of course, he breaks his arm and you have to explain it to their mother. And, not that it ever happened. Okay, now, Macbeth says, prithee peace, and this is at line 50 to 52, I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none, which is a really interesting expression. So he is saying that there are human limits. If you go beyond those limits, if you use certain means to your ends, you're being inhuman.
Which is the perfect report to that are you afraid?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. Now, what's the perfect retort to that retort? It's over.
I'm going to get it from Lady Macbeth.
Killing
What?
of babies.
Sorry?
Killing of babies.
Not on this occasion, but yes. See, that's not always so attractive to everyone. But yes, you're right, that's on the next page. But the next line is, what beast was it then that made you break this enterprise to me? So were you a beast when you said, we have this golden prospect before us, I just find that astonishingly good response. But the thought behind the response shows the problem of their view of courage. Next two lines. So this is line 56. Cameron, can you just pull that? Thanks. Okay, so when you durst do it, so when you dared to do it, then you were a man. And to be more than what you were, you would be so much more the man. So what is it to be a man?
Boundlessly ambitious.
Boundlessly ambitious. Perfect. Yes. Yes.
What did you say?
Just to boundlessly ambitious.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what you said
Yeah,
at some
thank you.
point.
And boundless is good because
Yeah.
boundless means without limit,
Yeah.
right? Without limit means without terminus, without end, without completion, without any security, right? Without any actuality. So there's a potentiality with no actuality. That's a very abstract way of putting it, but I think that's the problem of their view.
It's like Nietzsche. Right?
Yeah, it's like nature.
Yeah.
So, because she says, nor time nor place did then adhere, and yet you would make both. So, I think that means, previously, you showed the right ambition because you didn't depend on the time or the place or what people thought of you. You would make the circumstances right. You would conquer fortune, to quote Machiavelli, right? Okay, but it's helpful to keep this view of the human being in mind. There's a guy called Paul Cantor, and when we've read Shakespeare before, I've recommended some of his videos because he is quite thoughtful and he's aware of the history of political philosophy. And he makes this point over and over again when he reads Macbeth, that in Greek you have a word for human being, anthropos, and you have a word for a male man, a masculine man, aner, and the word for courage is andrea, so manliness. The word for courage is manliness. And it's the same thing in Latin, virtus. The word for excellence is derived from the word for man. So there's that one of the excellences appears to be more masculine than the other. Whereas, this is the superficial cliche, one of the virtues that is more feminine is more, the gentleness which Lady Macbeth abjures. Right? And that's why she says, make me have no element of that excellence. Now, there is a parallel in these two uses of the word man. When Macbeth first says, I do everything a man would do, who does more is nothing. That is, anyone who does anything outside these bounds is acting in an inhuman manner, a bestial manner. But she's redefining it as boundless ambition. Okay. Okay, I think we can head on to Act 2. And but also, I meant to begin actually by asking if any of you had any thoughts about Act 1 or anything else, the preliminaries that we discussed, that you would like to, bring up. There's that passage that Khan and Kirsten, you both pointed out, where I was reading it differently, and I still haven't resolved that in my head. But if there's anything else that you want to discuss. Otherwise, we'll. Yeah.
Just in terms of them,
Thanks.
no, just in terms of how much, I don't really have a clear idea on this, but just in terms of how much each of the characters are actually deliberating about their own actions, it seems like a lot of what they're doing is coming from the witches and them planting this idea in their head, and in some way the witches kind of confirm that a certain course of action is the right thing to do, or the fate, it's ordained by fate in some way. So I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I think there's how much are they actually deliberating about what they're doing as opposed to just thinking it's right because it's it's going to happen anyway, or something. It's fateful, or something like that.
Teleological rationalising, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a parallel between that and thinking about like if God has all knowledge, then do you have free will? That type of discussion. Is that what you're trying to get at, or maybe it's probably just a tangent to this? Like for example, like the witches tell you that they're going to be king, like Macbeth is going to be king, and then basically Macbeth. Well, if this knowledge is true, then do Macbeth still have free will to do all this type of
kind of like that.
yeah.
Yeah, those are very good points, and this is somehow near the key to the play, which I yet haven't found. But there is this problem. So if we look at it just on the surface, does Macbeth believe that the witches tell the truth?
Yes.
Because?
He wants to.
Okay, that's an interesting answer. He wants to, yes. Okay,
I
yes.
think the last line of Act 1 is very important.
Yes.
False face must hide what the false heart does know.
This is your favourite theme.
Yes.
If people have favourite themes, often it's a projection. No, sorry. Yeah. No, that's.
World's biggest hypocrite, that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's this whole thing of,
Yeah.
deliberation, yeah.
Okay, no, that is very important.
But it's also an interesting point what you raise, that maybe it's going to happen, so I'm going to have to somehow do this.
Okay,
It's going to happen that I'll be king. So somehow I've got to make it happen. I don't know. Sorry.
I'm also surprised at how quickly things escalate between Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. It's like it goes from 0 to 100 very, very quickly, and it leaves sort of an absence there. But I wonder whether, in a sense, the ambition is already there for it to take hold so quickly, or otherwise maybe there's another explanation for that escalation of events after they hear a prophecy from the witches, which may or may not be. At that point in time, Macbeth can't know whether what they're saying is true.
Right.
It's only once he comes to know that he's being made Thane of Cawdor that he starts to give credence to it, writes to his wife, etc., etc.
Right. Yeah, it is. I mean, we get her with the letter telling about the witches, and she's immediately saying, "Yeah, don't lose heart. We've got to obviously commit murder immediately." So, and I think from the tenor of what she says, it implies that they've already thought this. And the people that they're around seem equally ambitious. So at the beginning of Act 2, I want to go back now because there's a passage we have to read on Macbeth because of what you were just saying, all of you. But at the beginning of Act 2, we'll just have a look at this one line, just about Banquo, Act 2, Scene 1, where it begins with Banquo saying, "How goes the night, boy?" And the boy, Fleance, says, "The moon is down, I have not heard the clock." Which, Now, Banquo says at line 7, "A heavy summons lies like head upon me, and yet I would not sleep." So the heavy summons appears to be tiredness. Yeah, you get heavy when you're tired. I can't see any other immediate summons apart from to sleep, right? But
Someone's like, something's drawing me
Yeah.
out of bed.
I'm being drawn to bed because I'm tired.
Yeah, but he's walking around at night. Like,
He is.
I don't know what's he doing there.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, in the next, so what are they doing at night there? Yeah.
He's also saying, "I would not sleep because we want to go cursed thoughts that nature gives."
That's what I wanted to, So, and he says, yet I would not sleep. So I'm taking it, he's saying, I'm very tired, therefore my body is summoning me to sleep, but I would not sleep. Merciful powers restrain in me the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to, so nature surrenders to the dreams of whatever it is. But the dreams, I presume, are about becoming king by murdering Macbeth or something like that. So I think that these people in general are fairly ambitious. We get that impression from Banquo as much as from Macbeth.
But Duncan wasn't a bad king, though, was he?
Well, everyone talks about him as if Duncan is very mild, and he was out of the battle, doesn't want to kill a fly, but he likes other people to do the killing so that he can remain pure. And that's showing a problem. Like, can you be a gracious and gentle king and not die? And Machiavelli would say no, right? And he does die. So the play seems to be showing us that that's inadequate. Macbeth's raw ambition is inadequate. If we could have a somehow tempered combination of the two. But just to jump back on Macbeth's self-understanding when he's considering the murder, this is a famous passage in the beginning of scene 7 of Act 1. Act 1, scene 7, and in our text, it's in the folder on page 39.
What line number?
So just beginning from line 1, where he says, if it were done, when it is done, then it were done quickly. Now, I mentioned last time how if you look at the words the witches use, fair is foul and battle won and lost, they're immediately repeated by Macbeth and Duncan within a couple of scenes. In scene 3 of Act 1, one of the witches says, I'll do, and I'll do, and I'll do. And he's now saying, done, done, done. There's all these echoes in the language, and particularly with the word do and done, which are used, I didn't do a search, but I'm pretty sure they're used more than in most other plays. Now here, for half a second, he uses the actual word rather than the euphemism of this business, this act. He says, if the assassination, right, could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success. Now we have to understand what this language means. So if the killing of Malcolm could trammel up the consequence, so there's no consequence of the killing, right? And catch with his death, surcease, his life has ceased, and it catches, trammels and catches, that is, it cordons off and prevents success, which is what follows, as in succession, not success as in things working out, right? So I'm going to stop the succession of further meaning from this act, right? But this blow, which might be the be-all and end-all here, but here. So he wants, but this is the tension within this speech and within a lot of what he does. He wants the result, which is that Malcolm's dead, so he can become king. But he wants to prevent this instant from changing, to allow the future to occur, because then he has to live with the consequence of the fact that he's committed the murder. And you mentioned, Deborah, last time that there are certain scenes that make you think he has a conscience, right? And he's sort of, this is an illustration of that, because he is afraid of the consequence of the act internally as well as externally. So then he says...
It's just that every time he hesitates, his wife starts stabbing at his manhood.
Yeah, that's his excuse. Yeah, no, you're right. Stabbing is a good metaphor there too. So then he says, but here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump to the life to come. Now, if we could stop time and we existed only in this moment, in the moment, right, as people say, for very similar reasons, we don't have to live with the consequences, right? Let's just live in the moment. You're here, I'm here. Forget the consequences. Yeah. So, but here upon this bank, and now there's little marks around shoal, because it's spelt SCHOOLE, which at the time, apparently, I know nothing of this, but the editors informed me, could mean school or shoal. And the editors, who are sensible, down to earth, and not world-changing poets, have all decided that it must be shoal because a shoal is like a bank, a river bank, and we have the river of life or time passing by, and if we could stop time and just stop it at this instant, right? So that has now, but I think the original text means school. I don't have any objection to that because maybe that's the metaphor, like time teaches all, time reveals all. I don't know. I just raise that as a possibility that the text might be right. But if we leave it at the moment with the editors, so upon this bank we jump the life to come. If we could stop the consequence of the act, then I'm not going to be punished in any possible future life. Right? Now, this speech is divided into 3 parts. The first part is stopping time so that you don't get punished in a future life. Now we get to the second part, which is about our earthly life. Right? But in these cases, we still have judgment here. And apparently, according to my editors, some famous actors have said we still have judgment here and put their hand on their heart. We still have an internal judgment. And that makes sense. Makes perfect psychological sense for Macbeth because he does, but that's not what he means here. He means judgment amongst a people, right? In the world in which we live, that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught return to plague the inventor. That is, if you start knocking people off, someone's going to knock you off. Right? This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. We get that the foul is fair metaphor is quite good for poisoned chalice, the beautiful, receptacle with the apparently rich-looking liquid that will kill you. Now, so then he says, he's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed. Then, as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. Besides, now the editors in Arden say, see, it's not double trust. There's not 2 reasons. There's 3 reasons. Shakespeare obviously can't count, so perhaps we should change the text. But that's not the point. The point is this speech is in 3 parts. The first part is heaven. The second part is world, earth. And the third part is poetry, which which combines the 2. So we'll read this. So besides, I think this is a new section. This Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off, and pity, like a naked newborn babe, striding the blast, the wind. So pity becomes personified and animated, and now is in the wind, right? Or heaven's cherubim, horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, that tears shall drown the wind. So the horrid deed is somehow conveyed by invisible couriers, so that everyone cries so much that, like the rain, when it starts to rain gently, and that stops the strong wind because the wind has died down and now you get rain. But the way the causality, if you're a human being on the ground getting soggy, it looks as if the rain has stopped the wind, but it's not. But in any case, the rain follows the wind as frequently, especially in Brisbane. That's an enormously complicated poetic metaphor where we've got where not only do the elements echo and change human actions, but they're informed by a poetry that makes use of sightless couriers, heaven's cherubim, who are horsed in the wind and so on. So we have the speech has 3 parts: heaven, earth, a poetic expression that combines both, meteorological conditions and heavenly beings and so on. And all of this is interesting from the point of view of the fact that it's written by someone who's very, very well aware that he is writing poetic images. Yeah. So whenever someone says something about what is an image as opposed to the real thing, like when Lady Macbeth says to Macbeth, how could you be frightened of killing Duncan? He's asleep. People who are asleep or dead are like pictures of people. They're not people. Okay, so that's a very interesting thing. I think that expresses the tension within him. He wants the act to be in the be all and end all, to have no consequence, but he's doing the act for the consequence. So he's got and that brings up the point that you raised, that he wants both to see and not see the end of his action. Yeah. We've already gotten to 4:58, and we have not got to Act 2. That's a kind of small crime. But in Act 2, though, the main part of Act 2 is Scene 3, which we're going to watch and have a break and watch. But let's just get through Scene 1 and 2, and then we'll have a break. Unless you're struggling, and we need to... Okay, so back to Act 2. Banquo and Macbeth, in the folder, this is on page 51, and it's Act 2, Scene 1, line 24. Banquo and Macbeth have a little dialogue about having seen the witches. So at line 24, Banquo said, "All is well. I dreamt last night of the 3 weird sisters. To you they have showed some truth." And Macbeth says, "I think not of them," obviously one of his many lies. Yet when we can entreat an hour to serve, we would spend it in some words upon that business, if you would grant the time, at your kindest leisure. This is like 2 Machiavellian princes who are saying not what they think. They're sort of sparring. Okay? And Macbeth says, "If you shall cleave to my consent, when it shall make honour for you." So if you can make time to discuss with me, it'll win you honour. And Banquo says, "So I lose none in seeking to augment it," which is obviously not Macbeth's motto, right? So Banquo is saying, I would like to gain honour, but not if I have to lose some to gain it. For example, by murdering my king. That's what he's saying. I'm not sure I wouldn't trust Banquo any further than I trust Macbeth, but this is what he's saying. But still keep my bosom franchised and allegiance clear. So still keep my honest allegiance to the king. Yeah, that's one implication. But if I can do that, I'll be counselled. And then so Banquo and Fleance leave. And now Macbeth speaks to a servant, "Go bid thy mistress, when my drink is ready, she strike upon the bell, get thee to bed." Now the drink, which is later described as a posset, everyone has a nighttime posset, and a posset is warm milk plus either beer or wine. I mean, obviously we all have that these days. You prepare a posset. I can't imagine anything worse. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. That's such an odd combination. For me, it's either milk or beer. I'm not going to have the 2 together. Okay, but now then there's a pause, and we have this scene, which we're not going to see because we're seeing the next scene, where he says, "Is this a dagger, which I see before me, the handle toward my hand?" Now, in this scene, he is clearly seeing something. Well, he seems to himself to see something, the existence of which he doubts. So he says, "Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, yet I see thee still. Art thou not, fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight?" And apparently no. "Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat oppressed brain?" Now that's similar to what Banquo said when the witches disappeared. Right? Was that, the earth has bubbles, and these are of it. These are, part of the Earth's capacity for things to just appear and disappear. Or have we eaten of the insane brute in someone? So have we dreamt that? And he's saying something similar here, but what we're presented in the play is that this is something that he sees, just as he will see Banquo in the banquet in Act 3, and no one else does. So no one else sees the dagger. Now, he draws the dagger, and this is line 54. Thou marshallest me the way I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. I think we're meant to infer that the image attracts him the way he was going. The illusion draws him towards what he was already doing. And so it's a projection of his intention, desire. Right, and then the knife becomes bloody. At line 61, after describing that, line 61, he says, now over the one half world. So obviously Shakespeare, he's aboard with the recent teaching that the world's a globe and the sun shines on one half only as it turns around. Yeah. Anyway, now over the one half world, nature seems dead and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. That's the same as Banquo. Nature, when nature's asleep, it's overcome by dreams. And he had bad dreams as well. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings. So the witches somehow part of this world that is not quite natural, which makes sense. They're supernatural creatures of some kind within the play. And withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel, the wolf, whose howls is watch. So whereas normal human beings have someone who have a clock that strikes at 12, or they have a watch that is a watchman who says it's now 12 o'clock, withered murder has a wolf that howls at the appropriate time, just in case you use a watch, not a wolf. Thus, with his steady pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides, towards his design moves like a ghost. So, withered murder moves like a ghost. Now we have another poetic image. Thou sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps, which way they walk, for fear the very stones prate of my whereabouts, and take the present horror from the time which now suits to it. Whiles I threat, that is, while I stand here making threats, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives. Deeds are superior to words. And this is a thought expressed by many people who are decent as well as indecent, that deeds are superior to, like, all you have is talk. Some people are actually doing excellent and good things. Yeah? But yeah, that can be either a good or a bad view of life. And what's the opposite? Or Socrates, who thinks that words are worth more than deeds. Okay, so, but this expression is very difficult. He says, hear not my steps, which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabouts. That makes sense. So he's saying to the earth, I don't want you, the stones of the earth, to talk of where I'm going. And take the present horror from the time, which now suits to it. Now, my editor, in the Arden 3rd edition, provides a couple of alternatives, which I find it difficult to make sense of, so I'll read it. Okay. They say, Macbeth seems to mean that the speaking stones would take away or remove the present horror, that is, the silence appropriate to the moment. So he's saying to the stones, don't take away the horror, that is, my intention to murder the king. That doesn't make sense to me. They quote, that's their view, and they quote Johnson saying, whether, quote, to take horror from the time means not rather to catch it as communicated, we had that before, take as be infected, than to deprive the time of horror deserves to be considered. So he wants the stones to be infected with the horror that of his intention. That also doesn't make sense to me. Muir counters Johnson, quote, in this queer state of objectivity, Macbeth, he wants the details of the scene to be in keeping with the deed. That is, he wants the stones to be infected with the horror of what he's doing so that they fit the time which now suits with the horror. Now, but what I think, that those are three eminent scholars, right? I don't really follow. I just can't follow that. But I'll just give you another suggestion, and then I'm happy to hear your suggestions. I thought he was saying, don't hear my steps, don't talk about where I'm going, right? Because you would take the present horror from the time now. I don't want the time to be extended. I want the instant to be self-contained. You would take this present horror from the moment now, which suits with it. This time, right now, suits with the horror. I get the horrible deed done, then we forget all about it. That's what he's trying to do, and that's what he tried to do by saying if we could stop up time on this shoal and bank and so on. Anyway, that's my thought, but yeah, I don't...
Could suit mean in the metaphorical like clothing theme that was in keeping with the whole place in terms of just wearing the suit? So I don't know if that would make sense, but like it would be like which corresponds to the time now suits with the horror, as in now wears the horror. So that resolves the whole problem with the second part, and then the problem is with the first part. How do you make sense of the first part? Of saying the present horror, something with the time,
Well, yeah.
Could suit be meant in the sense of make suit with something to put a case forward with it, to suit with it?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, if we take it in that, yeah, to say suit, the horror somehow fits with the time now because he's doing this. It could be because it wears the suit. If it was to take issue with it in a legal sense, if it just would, then it would be in disjunction from it. So I was thinking that he's saying that the horror now is suitable to the time. I want to stop time. That's what he was saying, like with its surcease success, like trammel up succession of time. Stop the consequences of them, act at this time.
Also in the succession of Duncan's line.
And that's good. That's very good. Yeah, so to trammel up the success would be to trammel up the succession of Duncan. That's perfect. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, but that combines the two things he wants. The succession of time and the succession of Duncan. Yeah.
I thought that's what you meant when you started explaining it as well. I thought that's what you, with the success bit.
Yeah, no, I thought more of the succession just of time. Yeah. But the effect he wants in time is that Duncan has no successors and that he replaces them. Yeah. The effect that he also wants is that there is no, he makes the instant everything. Okay. Scene 2, Lady Macbeth. So we're in Act 2, Scene 2. Now, how much do we have before we get to Scene 3? Yes. Sorry, do you want to grab that? No. Oh, yeah. Okay, two things. Page 57 of the folder, and this is Act 2, Scene 2, line 45. Macbeth has just said, he's now done the deed, right? He's killed the king, and he says, I heard two of them woke up and said a brief prayer and said amen, and he couldn't say amen. Amen stuck in my throat. That's line 44. Line 45, Lady Macbeth says, these deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad. If we thought about the deed as opposed to just did them, we'd go mad. But that's the problem with the play. They go mad because they do these deeds and they can't help but have them reflect on them at some level of consciousness, right? And then Macbeth goes on from there to say, I heard a voice say Macbeth has killed sleep. And there's the most beautiful little ode to sleep, including the line, sleep that knits up the ravelled sleeve of care. A beautiful homely image. But leaving this aside, because some of us want tea, at line 59, Lady Macbeth says, you do unbend your noble strength to think, first of all, just to think, so brain sickly of things. So Shakespeare has invented an adverb. We put ly on our adverbs, quickly, slowly, thoughtfully, so brain sickly, right? So as if thinking is itself a kind of sickness. So don't think so intelligently, don't use your brain. If you use your brain, we're done. Now, it's just after there at line 69 that she says, give me he now won't take the daggers back to put them next to the guards who are going to get blamed for the dead. Give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. Now, she says that, but 2 minutes ago she says, I would have done the deed if Duncan didn't look like my father. Like he was an image of her father. So the image, she's saying, don't be afraid of images, but she herself wasn't able to do it because of an image. And then I very briefly, Macbeth at line 78 is talking about washing his hands, and this is just something weird that Shakespeare does, and I don't know what it means. At line 78, will all great Neptune's ocean. Well, he doesn't have to say great Neptune's ocean, he could have just said Neptune. So we got the Latin version, Neptune, and we have ocean. Neptune's ocean, wash this blood clean from my hand. No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous, that's a Latin word, right? Seas incarnadine, which is a Latin word, making the green one red, which is two Anglo-Saxon words. Grün, rot, right? So why does he give us a Latin and an Anglo-Saxon translation? And we have these complicated, mellifluous Latin expressions followed by the very simple, straightforward English. Yeah, it's just a curiosity. But last line and then break. Okay, so this is right at the end of scene 2 at line 94. Where she's just said, be not lost so poorly in your thoughts. Let's just stop thinking. And he says, to know my deed, 'twere best not know myself. And that's his dilemma. He can't know himself and know his deed. But can you live not knowing what you're doing? That's the problem. Okay, so we have gone to 5:15. I apologise. Now, I've put into the link, into the chat, what we're going to have to watch in the video, which is Act 2, Scene 3. So we'll do that, and that's 11 minutes or so. So if we come back at just after 5:30 to discuss. Okay.
With that, anyway, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to share the text and go back to the porter, because he's one of the keys of the play. Thank you. The little comic diversions in Shakespeare often give you assistance in understanding what's going on. So the porter, this is the beginning of Act 3, Scene 3, line 1, and on the folder it's page 61.
Act 2, Scene 3?
Choosing.
Act 2, Scene 3, yeah. Did I say something else? I continually in confusion trying to look and find things and speak it. Yeah. Okay, so Act 2, Scene 3, there's knocking, and the porter says, "Here's a knocking indeed. If a man were the porter of Hellgate, he should have old turning the key." Now, I didn't know this. The word old at the time can mean an abundance or too much of something. So if you were the porter of hell, you would have far too much time turning the key. Why? Because most people are rubbish. Like, that's the implication. Yeah, most people are bad, and which is meant to be funny, I think. So there's knocking, and he says, "Who's there in the name of the devil, in the name of Beelzebub?" And we get 3 examples. A farmer that hanged himself on the expectation of plenty. Now, apparently, farmers at the time were thought to like it when there wasn't much food around, because that meant prices were up. Right? So he hanged himself because it looks like there's going to be a great crop in all of England, Scotland. So that's disappointing. I won't be able to rip everyone off. Right? That's the first example. Second, faith. He's an equivocator that could swear in both the scales against either scale, who committed treason enough for God's sake, yet could not equivocate to heaven. Now, I'm informed by the Arden edition about the gunpowder plot against James I at this same year that this play is being written. And one of the conspirators is a guy called Garnet, who wrote a treatise on equivocation, in which he argues that if you happen to be Catholic in England, which at the moment is, probably wasn't called, was it called, probably called Church of England, which is a version of Protestantism. But anyway, in order to get Henry VIII safely married, we had to split from the church. And so at the time, and so naturally when there was a Catholic king, they would persecute the Protestants, and when there's a Protestant king, that would persecute the Catholics. And this guy writes his book on equivocation, so that if you're a Catholic and you're being tortured, you're allowed to lie. You're allowed to say, "I believe everything you want me to say, as long as in your heart you acknowledge the truth." So equivocation, and a justification for equivocation. And then apparently this guy, when he was on the scaffold being executed for being part of this plot, he said, "You can't equivocate to heaven." And this appears to be a reference to this conspiracy. But anyway, that brings now, and then we have the third crime, which is the English tailor come hither for stealing out of a French hose. Apparently, French hose means French trousers, right? So the guy is making French trousers, but he's putting in less cloth than he should, so that he can use that cloth in other products. So we have a kind of petty crime. And we have the exploitative crime surrounding the theologico-political crime of equivocation, because we're living in a time prior to, Spinoza wrote the book, The Theological Political Treatise, to try and separate theology and politics, which is the modern innovation, that you can have a state and then society. And if that society has one church or many churches, that's fine, but it's separate from the state. But that's prior to that. I think those things were always connected. If you're an Athenian, you're meant to pray to Athena and Poseidon and so on. If you're Roman, Zeus, and so on. And okay, so those things weren't as separate as they can be in modernity. Okay, so that sets up this. It appears to be just a diversion, but then the diversion is picked up in his next speech about drunkenness. So that's on page 63 of the Folger, Act 2, Scene 3, line 29. So he's just said to Macduff that drink is a great provoker of 3 things. And at line 29, he tells you what the 3 things are. Nose painting, that is apparently...
Like your nose turning red?
Yes.
When you're drunk?
Yeah. And apparently people who are very alcoholic get a red nose. I don't know. I mean, all that milk and beer, it hasn't happened to us, so nose painting, sleep, so, it makes you go unconscious, and urine. Now, lechery, sir, it provokes and unprovokes. And he goes into that in detail. Line 36. In conclusion, drink equivocates him in a sleep, and giving him the lie leaves him. So drink equivocates. It sets you on, it takes you off, it increases your desire, takes away your capacity. Right. Now, when there's, according to my count, 4 times thus far, either Macbeth or Lady Macbeth has compared their hopes of killing the king and taking over to being drunk. And for example, Lady Macbeth says, were your hopes drunk, blah, blah, blah. And the most recent one, though, is Lady Macbeth, and this is, I think, relevant. I just want to quickly find it. Yes, so at the beginning of Act 2, Scene 2, so I'm sorry, we have to go jumping back a few pages, 55 in the folder. Act 2, Scene 2, first 2 lines. Now, Lady Macbeth has just given a drink to the guards to knock them out so Macbeth can go kill them. She says, that which has made them drunk hath made me bold. So drink is equivocating between these people. Is doing one thing to Lady Macbeth and another thing to... So the drink is being compared to the origin of their ambition, as when she said, were your hopes drunk, and so on. Now, that doesn't give us any clear sense, back to Act 2, Scene 3, sorry. Yep.
Just reminds me of that other passage where Macbeth is saying ambition overleaps itself and sort of falls over, it stumbles over itself in a sort of drunken manner as well.
Right. And so this is what happens in the play, that he acts on his ambition and it leads to his downfall. And this comes back to Khan and what you were saying before about what's the relation between the way he acts and the witches, and therefore what appears to be an expression of his fate. Yeah? Isn't that what your will?
Yeah, I mean, something like that. I wasn't entirely sure what I was saying, actually.
I think that was one of the things. Yeah. I mean, it does seem to precipitate somehow okay, first of all, we've noticed that there already appear to be this kind of ambition and these kind of dreams amongst these people, and in particular amongst Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, on the one hand. But it does seem to precipitate rapidly that ambition into certain kinds of action. But it equivocates with them, right? Because it tells them something that makes them want to go on rapidly and criminally with a dream that they may have had that wasn't going to be realised criminally, on the one hand, and it tells them things that are ambiguous, yes, that equivocate with them. And the only other use of the word equivocation outside of these 4 uses here is when he says, I think I'm being equivocated because this wood appears to be moving to... Burnham Wood is moving to Dunsinane, which is one of the things he was promised. You're not going to have any trouble until that happens. Right, so, and then that was an ambiguous expression that leads him in the wrong direction. So just it seems that they are set on by these equivocating supernatural things in some way. And he says, I thought this was an aspect of what you were saying. If it's fated, then what do you have to do about it? And there was that moment early on where he said, if chance will have me king, well, maybe chance will do it without my stir. I'm not quoting it precisely, but if this is fate, then what do I don't have to... It's like the problem that Marx has faced. We're going to go to the... history will go through its preordained rational process, and we'll end up at the history will begin with the revolution of the proletariat. But if that's historical fate, then we don't have to do anything about it. So why are we holding these meetings? And
Can I just say, I was wondering about in terms of connecting to what you're saying about nature before that, and that's that shift towards kind of that deterministic worldview, that if it is nature that is the cause of all these things, then that's just there's no ends-based discussion of where I will end up. Like what you were saying last week about literature telling us something more true than history, like the types of characters and where they'll end up. But if nature in this like more modern sense is, if you're right, I think it's the fate discussion is I'm losing my train of thought. It's more, I don't know, I don't know, it's just going to play out a certain way anyway, so I've lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, there's a kind of parallel
Yeah.
between thinking things are fated
Yeah.
and a kind of mechanical determinism
Yeah.
that because of your DNA or whatever it is, your
Yeah,
brain
yeah.
chemistry,
Yeah.
you're going to act in a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And so in both cases, you're not looking at the choices you're making.
Yeah.
It's determined. And that I think can be confusing because then what do you...
Yeah, yeah.
What is the spring of your action if not your choice?
Yeah.
Because we experience ourselves as having the choice. We can do something on the weekend that we want to do, one of these 17 choices, and each has a different value. But if you think, no, it's just fated, then it's just my brain chemistry, then it's not a choice.
I think that's also like just with the drunkenness though. I think there's something about desire which is like, it's an inevitable thing that can't almost be stopped. There's not much you can do about it.
Desire itself can't be stopped.
Yeah. Like that's the real, like the desire is the real thing. Yeah.
So are you suggesting, so if the desire is the spring of the action, right, and you can't control the desire, it's just what occurs to you. Yeah, but you can choose to act or not act on the desire.
But I think when they're talking about drunkenness, there's this idea that once people are drunk, they can't actually stop their desire. So I think that's why it's a theme, is that there's something kind of relentless about their desire, and therefore it's a valid thing.
Yes, I think that's good. I think that helps us relate the discussion of equivocation with the witches, because the supposed expression of his fate both sets him on and undoes him. It makes him more keen. You can see Lady Macbeth's excitement when she gets the letter. She is now determined, and then she finds out the king's going to stay there. That's it. Like, fantastic. All her dreams come true. So it really sets them on, and it undoes them in the sense of takes away their scruples about the murder, I think.
Yeah.
So that's somehow the equivocator for them. Yeah, but it acts like drink. Yeah.
There's one bit in this act where they talk about the horses eating each other.
Yes.
And I just thought that was relevant in terms of, like this political shift or whatever as well, in terms of nature being thought of this way and then everyone turning in against each other. And
It's one of the weirdest passages.
yeah, that really stood out to me. It was really creepy, but that's just, it seemed to reflect everything that's happening in this point.
Fair is foul, foul is fair.
Yeah.
Horses are eating people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and each other.
Yeah. But all the Thanes are, I don't know. Yeah.
Once you're set on the path of sating desire, which is where they go, and both of them consenting and driving each other on, there's no way of pulling out. I'm just suggesting that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not based on experience.
I haven't like that before, but that's where I'm going tonight.
Yeah.
I thought that followed from what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's scene 4 is very strange, and we should try and get there. There's a couple of things on the way.
It also seems to sort of flow into an underlying or an overarching, perhaps even,
theme of predestination, in a sort of perhaps even in a theological sense, where one's desires are also predestined. In desiring it, one's also expressing perhaps the will of God or what have you. That sort of aspect to me is interesting. There's sort of overlays in the text there.
Yeah, there's several views of the world that make it difficult to understand human choice. One is, if there's an all-powerful and all-knowing deity, then where is there free choice for humans? And all the monotheistic religions approach that in different ways. And one of them is to say, well, the human being is made in the image of a god, and therefore has awareness of good and evil and can choose. And therefore your likeness to God would be the will to choose the right or the wrong. Which is interesting. It's interestingly different from the classical view that your likeness to the divine is that you have a mind, and the divine is the intelligible character of the whole. But also the modern view that everything is mechanically determined. That also seems difficult to make sense of human choice. Our consciousness is that we can choose what we do, and that's difficult if everything's DNA or whatever. One tiny note. This is in the middle of what we just saw, Act 2, Scene 3, and this is at the end where Banquo is saying, "Look to the lady," at line 1. Where is it?
137 also, 140.
Yeah, at 148 is where I want to go to. But yeah, at 140, he says that twice, which is
All right.
interesting. But yeah, at 148 he says, "And when we have our naked frailties hid, that suffer in exposure, let us meet and question this most bloody piece of work to know it further." So he'd like to know what they're doing before they act, which is the opposite of what the Macbeths are telling each other. Like, no thought, no brain sickly consideration, just act. Right? And then when Macbeth re-summarizes, he says, "Let's briefly put on manly readiness," and he means readiness to fight. Like that. So he's now articulating what Lady Macbeth had articulated to him, that to be manly is to be not what he said before, which is to be humane, and there are humane limits, but to be ready to fight. Right? And this question of manliness will come back up. If I'm sure there are feminist interpretations of the play, because you could make one from the saying that it's an exposure of a certain aspect of masculinity that is destructive, and that gets exaggerated in Macbeth.
That'd be right, though, yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say about courage. Except I would say that courage is a necessary virtue for individuals, male, female, and for countries, right? Otherwise, they don't exist anymore. Yeah. But the very spring that allows you to have courage has dangerous potentialities within it. And I think that's what Shakespeare is trying to show us, that the spring of something that can be noble can also be bestial, right? But I just mentioned that because I'm sure there are many, many articles and books, and there's material in here that would...
And Martin, did I hear you earlier saying that you've thought that, or that you interpret Macbeth's murder as a courageous act? Did I hear you saying that earlier? Yeah, of Duncan, yeah.
Oh, no, I was just trying to suggest why, because they are saying, she's saying to him, screw your courage to the sticking post and go and kill the king. So how can that be? How can getting a knife and stabbing a sleeping man be a courageous thing? Okay. Now, I tried to explain that misunderstanding of courage by saying that if to do what's courageous is to act for the sake of what is honourable, and it's to overcome fear. Well, he's acting for the sake of getting the highest honours, and he's overcoming the fear of retribution and so on. So it's a simulacrum, a false image of what genuine courage would be. I take it that that's the cracked image that they're following. Is it? Yeah, but please, I'm just wandering through, so please bring up any lines that you want to discuss or that you find mysterious or interesting. And otherwise, we will go to Act 2, Scene 4. Okay. So here we're going to have to discuss this Thane Ross later, because he appears and disappears and comes in and out. It's not easy to know his character, but we'll come to some conclusions later in the play. And here he has a meeting with an old man who's not seen again, and the old man says at line 1 of scene 4 in Act 2, 70, which is 70 years, I can remember well, so he's probably 80. But within the volume of which I have seen hours dreadful and things strange, but this sore night hath trifled former knowings. Now, Ross then says effectively, is it because the day is embarrassed, or because the night is violently strangling the day, that it's now dark when it should be light? Right? And the old man says at line 13, "'Tis unnatural, even like the deed that's done." Now, when the deed was done, I believe it's Macduff says, "Oh, sacrilegious murder." Right? So it's not just a political, it's a theological crime. And that's, as I mentioned before, like traditional societies, there's no distinction between state and society or church or religious belief. And you'll notice that political rule always tends to attract around itself a kind of mystical aspect. Yeah.
It's a divine right of kings.
Right, but the divine right of kings, and why is there a divine right of kings? Because I assume, unless there's either A, kings are divinely appointed, I'm just putting that aside for the moment as a possibility, or B, we want to think of them, or some people want to think of them as divinely appointed, because then we can justify our obedience. Yeah. Otherwise, they're just human beings. Tell them to come. Yeah. No, that's all right. Yeah, don't know why my phone doesn't go all the time.
It's my watch. I thought I had it on silent, but obviously I didn't. Sorry.
That's all right.
Something about I don't know if it was on the Cantor lectures or something he talked about. He mentioned some book talking about Shakespeare's influence on future revolutions and all the stuff around kings becoming made human. Just that.
Well, he's writing.
Yeah.
So let's say this is around 1610. It's 1607 to 1610. Yeah. In 30 years' time, the English put to death a king. And he brings up all these classical. The theme of classical political philosophy is, what's the standard by which you can tell a king or a statesman versus a tyrant? And he makes these standards vivid. And so that means you can now say, well, this person's a tyrant, which means they're not legitimate. Whereas the divine right of kings is the king saying, no, we've been appointed by the whole cosmos. Even...
That's why murdering the king is an act of treason, as well as just a crime.
Yes.
And it's also against nature.
Yes.
In terms of the great chain of beings in the whole story.
Yes.
Also, the logic of it too is, the logic of it, at least perhaps for Macbeth, is based in heredity, because, of course, he won't become king without that. It's only by, I suppose, succession. What confuses me is that Malcolm and Donalbain disappear, and yet he's crowned king. That they would seem to me to be in the line to the throne more directly than Macbeth, but except somehow that happens.
Is that because Malcolm and Donalbain, they're scared that they'll be blamed for the murder of Malcolm, so therefore they flee before anyone can do something to them?
That's right.
Yeah, not that they'll be blamed, but they'll be murdered too.
Yeah.
Well, but
Wouldn't they become king anyway? Or is that...
But
that's real asking.
that's like an exiled king. That's no king.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what if they
You
stayed
need
now
someone-
I'm the king, or I don't know.
But I think there's normally an election, because Macbeth is elected, presumably because he played such a big part in the recent battle.
And also kill the two guys that killed the king, supposedly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Although, or perhaps it's also because he's older than the... I
don't know, but
But early in Act 1, I think it's scene 2, no, 5, where Duncan says, the king says, I now say that my son will inherit. He's now Prince of Cumberland. He's going to be the king. That's not the way it was going to go. There was going to have to be an election. When the Thanes get together, and maybe they just picked the person who's the son or whatever, but that wasn't settled until that point. That's why I suggested that you could say that that's Duncan's undoing, because now he's said this person's in the way to the, and immediately Macbeth says that's a step on which I must fall, unless
yeah, it's slightly confusing because it does go to his motivation. If he suspects that by killing Duncan, he may not still become king, why does he kill Duncan? So I don't quite understand.
Yeah, that's a good question.
He asks, what if we fail?
Yeah. 6:03, so I have to bring things to a close. Yeah, so thank you for your attention, and we'll catch up next week.
Thank you.